Good evening, folks. This is The Weird Part, and I am your host, Vincent Treewell. Tonight is going to be a solo episode, and I'm going to be discussing some interesting things that have been in the news just lately, involving possible alien disclosure. And there's some things that I think we should talk about, and I think you'll find them interesting. On June 5th, a publication called The Debrief reported that a former, and I quote, a former intelligence officer turned whistleblower has given Congress and the intelligence community Inspector General extensive classified information about deeply covert programs that he says possess retrieved intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. The information, he says, has been illegally withheld from Congress. He filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures, reported here for the first time. Other intelligence officials, both active and retired, with knowledge of the programs of their work in the various agencies, have independently provided similar corroborating information both on and off the record. The whistleblower, David Charles Rush, 36, a decorated former combat officer in Afghanistan, is a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, and National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. He served in the Reconnaissance Office's representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force from 2019 to 2021. From late 2021 to July 22, he was the NGA's co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force. And I continue to quote, the task force was established to investigate what were once called unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, and are now officially called unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP. The task force was led by the Department of the Navy under the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. It has since been reorganized and expanded into the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to include investigations of objects operating underwater. Groff said recoveries of partial fragments up to and include intact vehicles have been made for decades through the present day by the government, its allies, and defense contractors. Analysis has determined that, and here I'm going to cease quoting a little bit, but he describes material science testing the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. In filing his complaint, Rush is represented by a lawyer who served in the original intelligence community Inspector General. And now I return to quoting, we're not talking about prosaic origins or identities, Rush said, referencing information provided Congress and the current ICIG. The material includes intact and partially intact vehicles. So here we have a person who, at least superficially, prima facie, on the surface, appears to be in a position to know, who is saying that the government has, the U.S. government, other governments, and possibly defense contractors, private companies, Bigelow, happen to have in their possession crashed alien vehicles. That's, if true being the operant word, a bombshell. To continue to quote from the debrief, Colonel E. Nell, a recently retired Army colonel and current aerospace executive who was the Army's liaison to the UAP task force from 2021 to 2022 and worked with Grush there, characterizes Grush as beyond reproach. Christopher Mellon, who spent nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community and served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has worked with Congress for years on unidentified aerial phenomena. Says Mr. Mellon, a number of well-placed current and former officials have shared detailed information with me regarding this alleged program, including insights into the history, governing documents, and the location where a craft was allegedly abandoned and recovered, Mellon said. However, it is the delicate matter of getting this potentially explosive information into the right hands for validation. This is made harder by the fact that, rightly or wrongly, a number of potential sources do not trust the leadership of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office established by Congress. But some insiders are now willing to take the risk of coming forward for the first time with knowledge of these recovery programs. Jonathan Gray is a generational officer of the United States intelligence community with top-secret clearance who currently works with the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, NASIC, where the analysis of UAP has been his focus. Previously, he had experience serving private aerospace and Department of Defense Special Directive Task Forces. The non-human intelligence phenomenon is real. We are not alone, Gray says. I'll just let the irony of this coming from Mr. Gray hang there. To quote, retrievals of this kind are not limited to the United States. This is a global phenomenon, yet a global solution can use to elude us. At the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Grush served as a Senior Intelligence Capabilities Integration Officer, cleared at the top secret compartmentalized information level, and was the agency's Senior Technical Advisor for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, Analysis, Transmedium Issues. From 2016 to 2021, he served with the National Reconnaissance Office as Senior Intelligence Officer and led the production of the NRO's Director Daily Briefings. Grush was a GS-15 civilian, military equivalent of a colonel. Grush has served as an intelligence officer for over 14 years. A veteran of the Air Force, he has numerous awards and decorations for participation in covert and clandestine operations to advance American security. I would briefly point out that while Mr. Grush was an officer in the Air Force, the program in which he was previously working was run by the Navy. This may be important later when we discuss some of the factionalism within the upper echelons of the national security apparatus. And I would just like to point out, because not everybody knows this, that the second largest, well, if you ask people, what's the second largest air force in the world? The first largest air force on Earth is the U.S. Air Force. What's the second largest one? And most people would guess Russia, maybe Britain, maybe France, maybe China. No, the second largest air force is the U.S. Navy and Marines Air Wing. That is the second largest air force. So that might be relevant later, just to mention that. I'm going to continue to quote kind of extensively from the debrief article, just because I think it's important and it lays out certain information that I want to be direct with. And I should point out that it's not written by just anybody. It's written by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who are the same reporters who back in 2017 wrote the New York Times article that revealed that there was a U.S. military UAP program. So yes, these are some very mainstream reporters, and they are telling us what they're telling us. So take it for what it's worth, but it's in the context. This is not an internet rumor. This is being reported by the most mainstream of mainstream media. It is being reported, I would say, rather quietly. I am surprised at the number of people who haven't heard of this at all, and we'll get to others who don't care, but that's fine. But just, this is pretty close to official, without a stamp of approval, I guess, from the president or something, and we'll get to that. This is very what the establishment is putting out right now, or at least one wing of the establishment is putting out right now. So to pick up with the debrief article. According to a 2021 NRO performance report, Grush was an intelligence strategist with multiple responsibilities who analyzed unidentified aerial phenomena reports and boosted congressional leadership intel gaps in understanding. He was assigned by the Reconnaissance Office's Operations Center Deputy Director as an adept officer and strategist and total force integrator with innovative solutions and actionable results. Grush prepared many briefs on unidentified aerial phenomena for Congress while in government and helped draft the language on UAP for the FY fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, spearheaded by Senators Kristen Gillibrand of New York and Marco Rubio of Florida, and I added their states, and signed into law by President Biden. Any person with relevant UAP information can inform Congress without retaliation, regardless of any previous non-disclosure agreements. And this is really key. Okay, close quote. This is really key. Whatever one thinks of the politics of Senators Gillibrand and Rubio, and I'm certainly not endorsing either one. This isn't a political show. But they are elected officials. They are elected by the people. They are U.S. senators. The idea that they should be able to ask for information from the military and be denied seems to me to be preposterous. That's my take on it. We live in a democratic republic, at least theoretically, and the people choose the leaders, and if senators, of whom there are only 100, ask for information about a topic, I feel they should get it. And barring something really extreme, like an ongoing operation to shoot bin Laden or something, I believe they should get it in a prompt manner. And that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. There seems to be a conflict between two wings of the national security state. And we'll get into that in just a little moment here. To continue from the debrief article, in his statements cleared for publication by the Pentagon in April, Grush asserted that UFO legacy programs have long been concealed, with multiple agencies nesting UAP activities in conventional secret asset programs without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities. He said he reported to Congress in the existence of a decades-long, publicly unknown Cold War for recovered and exploited physical material, a competition with near-peer adversaries over the years to identify UAP crashes or landings and retrieve the material for exploitation/reverse engineering to garner asymmetric national defense advantages. In other words, close quote, in other words, that the United States, the Russians, the Chinese, and whomsoever else were rushing to get any crashed or landed UFO vehicles and try to reverse engineer their technology so we could have a weapons advantage. I'll be very honest, and I digress here for a moment. Nobody who listens to the weird part is going to mind a little digression. That's kind of what we do. But I'm very dubious about reverse engineering. I don't know how much value there would really be to finding something of a vastly higher level of technology. I kind of look at it like this. If you go back in time and hand a very intelligent inventor, a scientist, an engineer, but they're from hundreds of years ago, you give them our technology, are they really going to be able to back that up and figure out how to make it? Like, let's say you could go back in time and give Ben Franklin a laptop. Is he going to get anything out of that? Is that really going to work? I have grave doubts about that. That doesn't seem to me. You kind of have to build that level of technology from the ground up. I don't think you can start at the top and then bring it back down. Even if you were to hand Ben Franklin a boombox from the 80s, is he ever going to be able to make anything out of that? Or is that just going to be a strange box of wires? I question that. But I will just kind of leave that hang there. Because other people found it very, very important. So to continue, beginning in 2022, Rush provided Congress with hours of recorded classified information, transcribed into hundreds of pages, which includes specific data about the Materials Recovery Program. Congress had not been provided with any physical materials related to wreckage or non-human objects. Rush's investigation was centered on extensive interviews with high-level intelligence officers, some of whom are directly involved with the program. He said the operation was illegally shielded from proper congressional oversight, and he was targeted and harassed because of his investigation. Rush said that the craft recovery operations are ongoing at various levels of activity, and he knows the specific individuals, current and former, who are involved. Individuals in these UAP programs approached me in my official capacity and disclosed their concerns regarding a multitude of wrongdoings, such as illegally contracting against the federal acquisition regulations and other criminality and the suppression of information across a qualified industrial base in academia. Close quote. In other words, they were trying to hoard this knowledge and keep it secret. And secret to their specific program. And that kind of touches on something else. When people say the government, or the police, or the military, or the system, there is no monolithic entity like that. All of those things have many, many different agencies, and within each of those agencies, there's multiple factions pursuing their own agendas. And some of those agendas conflict hard with other agencies and factions' agendas. That I can say from experience, as well as countless things that have been well documented. To pick up again, associates who vouched for Grush said his information was highly sensitive, providing evidence that materials from objects of non-human origin are in the possession of highly secret black programs. Although locations, program names, and other specific data remain classified, the Inspector General and Intelligence Committee staff were provided with these details. Several current members of the recovery program spoke to the Inspector General's office and corroborated the information Grush had provided for the classified complaint. Grush left the government in April 7, 2023, in order, he said, to advance government accountability through public awareness. He remains well supported within intelligence circles, and numerous sources have vouched for his credibility. Quote, his assertion concerning the existence of terrestrial arms race occurring sub rosa over the past 80 years, that is 80 years, focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin is fundamentally correct, as it is the indisputable realization that at least some of those technologies of unknown origin derive from non-human intelligence, said Coronel, the retired Army colonel who worked with Rush on the UAP task force. In a 2022 performance evaluation, Laura A. Potter, Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Headquarters, Department of the Army, described Nell as an officer with the strongest possible moral compass. Close quote. And that's entirely the vibe I get at this point. Obviously, I can't vouch for him. I don't know the guy, but this does not seem like a grift. This does not seem to me like he's going to be on a reality TV show next year. It doesn't come off like that at all. This comes off as a true believing whistleblower who's trying to tell the truth. trying to get the truth out there. Now that's my impression early on, but that is definitely my impression. To continue, Grush is represented by Charles McCullough III, senior partner at Compass Rose Legal Group in Washington, and the original Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, confirmed by the U.S. Senate in 2011. At that time, McCullough reported directly to the then Director of National Intelligence, James R. Clapper, and oversaw intelligence officers responsible for audits, inspections, and investigations. Essentially, the internal affairs of the U.S. intelligence community. In May 2020, I added that last part about internal affairs. It's just, yes, that's kind of what he was. To quote, in May 2022, McCullough filed a disclosure of urgent concerns complaint of reprisal on behalf of Grush with the ICIG about detailed information that Grush had gathered beginning in 2019 when he was working on the UAP task force. An unclassified version of the complaint provided to us states that Grush had direct knowledge of the UAP-related classified information has been withheld and or concealed from Congress by elements of the intelligence community to purposely and intentionally thwart legitimate congressional oversight of the UAP program. All testimony Grush provided for the classified complaint was provided under oath. According to the unclassified complaint, in July 2021, Grush had confidentially provided classified information to the Department of Defense Inspector General concerning the withholding of UAP-related information from Congress. He believed that his identity and the fact that he provided testimony were disclosed to individuals and or entities within the Department of Defense and the intelligence community outside the IG's office. He did not allege that this information was improperly disclosed by any member of the office. As a result, Grush suffered months of retaliation and reprisals related to these disclosures beginning in 2021. He asked that details of these reprisals be withheld to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. The intelligence community's Inspector General found his complaint credible and urgent in July 2022. According to Grush, a summary was immediately submitted to the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The complaint was drafted and signed by McCullough and his managing partner. It ended with Grush's signature attached to his statements that I do solemnly affirm under penalties of perjury the contents of the foregoing paper are true and correct to the best of my knowledge. The whistleblower reprisal investigation was launched, and Grush began his communication with the staff of the Congressional Intelligence Committees in private closed-door sessions. According to Grush, certain information which he obtained in his investigation could not be put before congressional staffers because they did not have the necessary clearances or the appropriate investigative authority. A representative for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence told us in March that the committee members were not able to comment on the content of the complaint or confirm the identity of the complainant. When you have multiple, and I quote, when you have multiple agencies nesting UAP activities in conventional CAP programs, both as recipients of exploitation-related insights and for operational reasons, without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities, you have a problem, Grush said, referencing the highly secret special access programs and controlled access programs. Close quote. So they were apparently hiding UAP stuff within other highly secret and compartmentalized programs. That is his allegation. And I continue. Grush's willingness to take risks and speak out appears to be emboldening others with similar knowledge who believe in greater transparency. Jonathan Gray, the intelligence officer specializing in UAP analysis for the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, is speaking publicly for the first time, identified here under the identity he uses inside the agency. NASIC, headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, is the Department of Defense's primary Air Force source for foreign air and space threat analysis. Its mission is to discover and characterize air, space, missile, and cyber threats, according to the agency's website. The center's team of trusted subject matter experts delivers unique collection, exploitation, and analytic capabilities not found elsewhere, the website states. Gray said that such immense capabilities are not merely relegated to the study of the prosaic. Quote, the existence of complex historical programs involving the coordinated retrieval and study of exotic materials dating back to the early 20th century should no longer remain a secret, he said. The majority of retrieved foreign exotic materials have prosaic terrestrial explanation and origin, but not all, and any number higher than 0 in this category represents an undeniably significant statistical percentage. Close quote. It is unusual for an Air Force insider to come forward, as the Air Force has been less forthcoming than other agencies with regard to UAP. I'll just close quote there for a minute and say, yeah, that's what I mean about the Navy. The Navy seems to be the faction that supports disclosure, while the Air Force seems to be and I'm speaking in broad terms because there's factions within factions, but seems to be the faction that is opposed to disclosure. To pick up with a quote from Mr. Gray from the debrief article, a vast array of our most sophisticated sensors, including space-based platforms, have been utilized by different agencies, typically in triplicate, to observe and accurately identify the out-of-this-world nature, performance, and design of these anomalous machines, which are then determined not to be of earthly origin, close quote, Gray said. Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has been instrumental in arranging classified briefings for members of Congress and other officials about UAP, which include references to exotic retrieved materials. The first briefing he facilitated on retrievals of unexplained objects was provided to staff members of the Senate Armed Forces Committee on October 21, 2019, and the staff members on the Senate Intelligence Committee 2 days later, as reported by the New York Times. So there we have kind of some of the recent history of this. Mellon says that once members of Congress gain greater awareness of the information provided to their staff and the Inspector General, they will be in a position to quickly determine the truth if they have the will to do so. This is an unprecedented oversight challenge for the committees, but I believe we have leaders in Congress who are up to the task, Mellon said. Classified briefings are often presented for Jonathan Gray and his team at NASIC. High-level classified briefing materials exist in real-world scenarios involving UAP as evidenced by historical examples are made available to intelligence personnel on a need-to-know basis, he told us. I have been the recipient of such briefings for almost a decade. The National Defense Authorization Act, FY 2023, tasked the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence, with establishing for the first time a secure mechanism for the authorized reporting of sensitive information to defense channels. In addition, the legislation asks for reporting on material retrieval, material analysis, reverse engineering, research and development, involving unidentified anomalous phenomena currently and going back decades. Dr. Gary Nolan, I'm going to break from the quote here for a moment. Yes, he's a controversial figure. He is more involved in medical science than in anything to do with astrophysics or, metallurgy or things like that. But take it for what it's worth. To resume, Dr. Gary Nolan, a professor in the Department of Pathology at Stanford University and a renowned inventor and entrepreneur with more than 300 published papers, has started over a dozen companies based on technologies out of his laboratory. Nolan has previously applied some of these technologies to the analysis of exotic materials, publishing the first peer-reviewed paper examining such materials. Human civilization was utterly transformed by something as small as a grain of silicone or germanium creating the underpinnings of the integrated circuits that underlie computation and now even artificial intelligence, Nolan said. Close quote. Yes, we're talking about reverse engineering again. I've commented on that, but some people definitely believe it's very important. To resume, studying even small samples of purported anomalous material could lead to currently inconceivable benefits for humanity, he said. I'm really not going to go on with all of Gary Nolan's hopes for great things coming from reverse engineering. That's maybe a little off topic, because I think we're getting to something very different. To resume with the article a little bit further down, to encourage potential witnesses to come forward, the whistleblower legislation forbids any federal employee from retaliating against anyone providing authorized disclosure. Whistleblowing is essential to the checks and balances of our government, and no federal employee should feel discouraged from stepping forward due to fear of retaliation, said Representative Andre Carson told us. In May 2022, Carson presided over the first open congressional hearing on UAP since 1968. The case of David Grush marks a crucial test of these new whistleblower protections and their ability to protect future whistleblowers who decide to come forward. Jonathan Gray says secrets have been necessary. Quote, though a tough nut to crack, potential technological advancements may be gleaned from non-human intelligence, UAP/UAP retrievals by any sufficiently advanced nation, and used to wage asymmetrical warfare. So therefore, some secrecy must remain, he says. However, it is no longer necessary to continue to deny these advanced technologies derived from non-human intelligences exist at all, or to deny that these technologies have landed, crashed, or fallen into the hands of human beings. Gray noted that the hypothesis that the United States alone has bullied other nations into maintaining this secrecy for nearly a century continues to prevail as a primary consensus among the public at large. My hope is to dissuade the global populace from this archaic and preposterous notion, and to potentially pave the way for a much broader discussion, he said. Grush said it was dangerous for this 80 years arms race to continue in secrecy because it, quote, further inhibits the world populace to be prepared for an unexpected non-human intelligence context scenario. I hope this revelation serves as an ontological shock, sociologically, and provides a generally uniting issue for nations of the world to reassess their priorities, Grush said. And that's, and close quote, that's what I think this controversy really is about. I don't think it's about reverse engineering. I don't think it's about weapons technology. I think that the real question and the real separation between the two factions in the U.S. powers that be is over whether the public can handle the truth. And the truth being that, let me just put it like this. Once you, and I guess I just want to say this completely the right way, that if you're going to do disclosure that there are flesh and blood aliens and nuts and bolts alien spaceships here on Earth, if you're going to do that disclosure, you can only do that once, okay? Once it's out there, it's out there. So it has to be handled absolutely carefully. I think that's the main concern of people in the top echelons of government. That what is going to be the reaction if we bring out a crashed UFO? You can't undo that. You can't walk that back, okay? Once you've shown them the dead alien or, the flying saucer, it's there. And they're not going to buy a weather balloon, okay? It's going to be explosive. And I think for a certain percentage of the population, not just certainly in America, but around the world, it's going to really disrupt their paradigm and how their worldview. And I don't think it's a majority, but I think it's a significant chunk that are going to be totally disrupted. And I just look at how the American public reacted to COVID. And, I mean, we'd had pandemics before, and one can have reasonable objections and questions to various things that were done, to vaccines, to masking, to lockdowns. You can have reasonable concerns and objections. And then you can have batshit crazy ones, okay? That everybody who gets the vaccines and go blind. They put a microchip in it. No, they don't, okay? So that was how we dealt with a literal physical disease where a bunch of people died, and it was terrible. But there was so much craziness. Now, how would a large segment, not a majority, but a chunk of the population react if the government came out and said, yeah, aliens are totally real, and here's one of their ships? A bunch of people would immediately assume that the aliens are demons, and this is all a plot by the New World Order, and FEMA concentration camps, etc. I think they're very concerned about that. At the same time, as the whistleblower said, if you don't have disclosure of what the government, and I do the same thing everybody else does, but the entire government, if we don't have disclosure of what they know, at least in general terms, we're not prepared for an unexpected alien reveal, which might be much worse and much more chaotic. So, you know, it's a big concern. And I think managing the public reaction is really the name of the game, is really what the discussion is about. You know, and I don't know to what extent anybody's happened to see President Obama discuss this stuff. There's a fascinating episode of Stephen Colbert show where Obama's the guest, and Colbert asks him about UFOs, and Obama is cryptic as can be, while still I can't say that, and being very secretive, but still kind of letting you know I'm not saying yes, but I'm not saying no, so I kind of mean yes. And that, you know, that's what I took from it. And it's like I want to disclose, but we're not quite ready to disclose. And I feel there's been a warming up process going on by the pro-disclosure side for several years now, since the 2017 New York Times article, that is gradually easing us into, okay, we've got something very important to tell you, but I need you to sit down, I need you to be calm, okay, we can't just blurt this out. And meanwhile, I think there's been activity by the anti-disclosure faction that includes a lot of disinformation. A lot of the reaction, both in the mainstream media, there's an article I'm going to get to in just a moment in The Atlantic, which has a very cynical, mocking tone. It's a good article, but they have a position, and their position is, yeah, this is the same BS we've been hearing for years. That's almost identically what a lot of my friends and colleagues in the para-weird world believe. I don't blame them for believing that. Hell, you know, that makes a lot of sense. But let's just step back for a second and ask, maybe the anti-disclosure people have been intentionally putting out disinformation as kind of a crying wolf operation. That if you put out enough crap and it's exposed repeatedly, then people won't believe it when the real thing comes out. I think that would be a very effective strategy to hide something in plain sight. That is my take on it. There are numerous examples, but you have to ask yourself, like, why did Richard Doty feed Linda Moulton Howe all that crap? Why do they even care about the ufological community? It's a pretty marginal community. It doesn't run anything in this country. Why lie to them to the extent that they have? Why take it seriously at all? Why just completely ignore them? Well, what's the worst that's going to happen? Nobody cares. Maybe because if you put out enough disinformation, when the real information comes out, everybody will just kind of shrug and say, yeah, we've heard this all the time, and not take the real one seriously. I don't discount that at all. I think that's a realistic possibility. The pro-disclosure faction has definitely been promoting this narrative for a while, and I'd like to reference Diana Pasulka's fascinating book, American Cosmic. And I don't want to try to break her near 400-page book down to a couple of sound bites, but she definitely promotes the idea that there have been crashed craft, and that the government has recovered those, and that there are physical aliens driving physical craft, and that we have some of them, at least the machines, and that's part of the book. Now, Diana Pasulka is a well-credentialed and high-achieving scholar, and she is not a gullible person, but of course she could be shown false things. And is she bringing a truth, or is she being another Linda Moulton Howe, who's also a very accomplished journalist, and she didn't fall for, I guess she did fall for it, but when somebody from the Air Force tells you, Air Force Special Investigations Office tells you, I'm going to share this with you, you might tend to take that pretty seriously, Is a game being run? That's only time will tell. But my take on this at this point is not that. It's that there is a faction within the upper echelon of the U.S. government that wants to disclose, and that has things to disclose. And again, I guess I should mention that there's a lot of debate among ufologists about the nuts and bolts theory versus the more woo theories. And I recently gave a presentation on the Strange Realities broadcast with the Conspiranormal guys, Sir Stevenson and Adam Sane, which I was very privileged to do that, where I talked about extraterrestrial contact through spiritual mediumship, like the complete opposite of this crash saucer nuts and bolts stuff, the total opposite. That my basic thesis was that if extraterrestrials are coming here, they're coming here through astral travel or out-of-body experiences, that type of thing. They're not building spaceships and flying them here. Well, the thing is, one doesn't cancel out the other. You could have both. You could totally have both. Also, I can be wrong about stuff. That's cool too. I'm not so egotistical that that's written in stone. That was just one possible explanation. In the words of Leonard Nimoy, based in part on theory and conjecture. So there you go. Just because there are other forms of UFO experiences, which are definitely spiritual, definitely non-physical, definitely high strangeness paranormal, doesn't mean there couldn't be literal alien spacecraft that crashed, okay? One doesn't cancel out the other. You could have both of those things. And I'll just leave that hanging there. But, in an interesting development, this was posted on June 6th, and it comes from a UK newspaper, The Independent. White House dodges question on UFO whistleblower. And I quote, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre dodged a reporter's question concerning extraterrestrial life, referring the query to the Pentagon during the White House press briefing of Tuesday, June 6th. The question was related to a recent report from a whistleblower who claims the U.S. government has concealed physical evidence of non-human origin craft from Congress and filed a complaint for alleged retaliation. The reporter asked Ms. Jean-Pierre, this whistleblower report alleging the U.S. military has been retrieving craft of non-human origin for at least several decades. Are we alone? And if we were not, would you even tell us? In response, Ms. Jean-Pierre said she would refer that question to the Department of Defense and let them answer that. Yeah, I gotta say that's a complete dodging of the question. The White House did not want to touch that at all, which I think alludes to the importance of this issue, and that this may not be a settled dispute at the highest levels. Again, if you're going to do a disclosure, you can only do it once. You can't take it back and say, no, we're wrong about all that stuff. There was zero desire to actually answer that, and that's not coming from her, that's coming from all the way up. So take that for what it's worth. So to continue, there's an interesting article published in the Atlantic magazine, which is about as mainstream as it gets, published June 7th by Marina Corin, called Why Everyone is Suddenly Talking About Aliens. And it has a complete cynical, mocking tone. Take that for what it's worth. But it is a very good article. She does some excellent reporting on Major Donald Keyhole and his efforts at UFO disclosure decades ago. And it discusses something that here we get a little into the meat of the subject. And I quote, in a separate interview with News Nation, which has advertised itself as an alternative to major cable networks, I have not had a chance to listen to the News Nation interview. But she quotes, Grush said the military has even discovered the dead pilots of these craft. Believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true. So Grush is not only saying we've got the craft, but that we've got the dead aliens. Now it doesn't get more important than that. With no disrespect to anyone's religion, this is, if true, this is the biggest news story in human history. Okay? Suddenly, you can't go back to, we're alone. Suddenly, this is the way the world is now. And, it's that important. It's at that level. She goes on to a number of other things, but basically casts doubt on this and says, basically, we've heard it before. We've been hearing it, and it's always been fake in the past, and it's probably fake now. Which, again, it's interesting to me that the same view that a very mainstream publication has is pretty much my view. It's pretty much the same view as my friends in the paranormal community, who almost word for word said, yeah, they're always lying. They'll never tell the truth. And I have to disagree there. I have to say that we should be skeptical. I don't accept this at face value. I don't just bite on this and think, oh yeah, it's going to happen now. No. I hold it and set it aside and we'll see what happens. But we shouldn't be... There's a difference between being skeptical and being cynical to the point where you they're always lying. Well, they're not always lying. The government has disclosed a lot of terrible things that they did. I'm thinking of when the Clinton-era Secretary of Energy apologized for all those experiments that they did with radiation on pregnant women and children and convicts. And yeah, the government has admitted to terrible things, and people have been held accountable, and the truth has come out. And if we can go through the proper channels in the legal system, maybe we can make the truth come out. I don't think that's a lost cause. I really don't. And I don't want to get into a frame of mind where no matter what they show you, you're going to assume it's fake. That, I think, would be a mistake. Because there could be an opportunity for truth to come out. And I'm going to take this in a different direction in just a little bit. But I did want to get one good quote in there, because the obvious parallels come up. Is Grush here just the latest incarnation of Lou Elizondo? Because obviously they bear some similarity. And I just get such a totally different impression from them. I just feel that Elizondo was a military veteran who found a rich guy who he could tell what he wanted to hear and get some money. And since then, nothing of any significance has come of it. And that's not what I get from this. It's not at all. But I'd like to go to the Atlantic article for just a moment. And I'm sorry, folks, I was just looking for the humorous quotation, which is apparently not in this article, about how often Lou Elizondo walks up to the point of saying something significant and invokes either his non-disclosure agreement or his security clearance. I don't have that one, but he does that a lot, and it's a thing. And I just thought it was funny. But anyway, I just want to make it clear that there are apparently two factions, a disclosure faction and an anti-disclosure faction. And I think we should just keep an open mind. And I'll even go as far as, I know I just trashed him 2 minutes ago, but saying that maybe Lou Elizondo and DeLong and that whole thing were a failed attempt by the pro-disclosure faction to get their message out. I mean, every marketing campaign, every operation doesn't succeed. Maybe that just didn't work out. But that doesn't mean there's nothing there. I think we should be able to hold those opposing beliefs at the same time. I guess right about at this point, I'd like to address one comment or concern that keeps coming up a lot in this discussion, and that is, if a conspiracy this big was real, they couldn't possibly keep that secret. And that always bothers me, because it runs so opposite to things that have actually happened. Okay? They couldn't keep this program secret. Well, for one thing, it hasn't exactly been secret. People have been blurting out the truth for decades. I'm thinking of Philip J. Corso, who I'm not vouching for at all, but his day after Roswell, I've always felt it might be totally fake, but he was a real colonel in the Army for 30 years. That's verified. That was his actual career. And when he came out with his story of seeing alien bodies and being involved with a crashed craft, and again, I am not signing on to what he has said and the whole Roswell thing. There are, I think, better explanations for Roswell. But Corso put that book out like a year before he died. If there was a grift, why wouldn't he put it out 20 years ago and milked it forever, you know? I think that sometimes we should just withhold judgment a little bit and, consider that there are possibilities that may involve unknown unknowns, that we don't know what we don't know. And that can conspiracies exist, and can they last over decades? Well, let's look at one that actually did. And here I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that I care about and that is important and that really happened. Okay? And that's the 1980 October surprise. The time that Jimmy Carter was president and Iran had had a violent revolution, and the revolutionary government was holding American hostages, and what they wanted was the Shah of Iran's money. They were saying, hey, we had a revolution, we're the government of Iran now, let's unfreeze the Shah's government's accounts because we're the new government. And until you do that, we're going to hold these 54 Americans hostage. And for those who are not of a certain age, I can't tell you how big a deal this was. It was enormous. It was on the news every single night. And Jimmy Carter had actually worked out an agreement with the revolutionary government of Iran that he would order the unfreezing of the previous government's accounts, and they would release all the hostages. And then the conspiracy theory went that agents of the Reagan campaign asked the Iranians, in other words, the terrorists holding hostages, not to release them right away, but keep holding our fellow Americans hostage for a while longer so it doesn't, Carter doesn't win the election. And that was treated as a ridiculous conspiracy theory for about 40 years or more, about 43 years. And then in March 18th, 2023, the New York Times ran a piece by reporter Peter Baker that basically uncovered that all was true and that totally happened. And the people involved, it's questionable whether Reagan ever knew. Usually there's kind of a policy of plausible deniability where maybe you just go and do stuff and don't tell the boss. That way he or she is not on the hook. That's kind of how Watergate went down. Nixon didn't order the burglary. G. Gordon Liddy, who may have been crazy as hell, ordered the burglary, but Nixon just found out about it after it happened. I don't know. We'll never know what Reagan knew. But what actually happened, and this was revealed, again, this was reported March 18th, 2023 by the New York Times. A former Texas legislator, Ben Barnes, confessed that he was unknowingly a part of the October surprise. That he went on a tour of the Middle East, going to multiple countries, with former Texas Governor John Connally Jr., which, for those who follow this type of thing, John Connally Jr. was the other guy in the car with JFK when he was shot. Yes, that happened. John Connally was shot too, according to official sources, by the same magic bullet that killed JFK and also wounded him. Yes, he was there. That happened. John Connally still went on. He survived. Obviously, Kennedy died, and Connally survived. And Connally went on to have this very high-powered career, holding multiple cabinet positions and things like that. But yes, he went to a tour of the Middle East in 1980 and made it clear, according to Barnes, who was his longtime friend, and who was saying he's making essentially a deathbed confession because Jimmy Carter is in hospice and Barnes is in his 80s, and he said he wanted to set the record straight. That him and John Connolly Jr., who is deceased, went to the Middle East and tried by every means possible to communicate, because they couldn't communicate directly, to the Iranian revolutionary government not to let the hostages go till after the election. Which is exactly what happened. The hostages were released within about an hour of Ronald Reagan being sworn in. Coincidence? Well, you be the judge. But that actually happened. And as soon as he returned from the Middle East, John Connolly went and reported in to William Casey, who was the chairman of the Reagan campaign, and when Reagan became president, became director of the CIA. So, was that a conspiracy? I mean, I have to challenge anybody's mindset if you don't see a conspiracy there. It's all documented that Connolly went on this tour of the Middle East. They communicated with numerous Middle Eastern important VIPs who could get a message back to Tehran that don't let the Americans go right away. Let them go in a couple months. In other words, hold my fellow Americans hostage a little while longer so we can influence the election. And that was secret from 1980 until earlier this year. But sometimes the truth comes out. And please look it up. Like I said, New York Times, March 18th, 2023, article by Peter Baker. That happened, okay? And if you want to dig into it, there's plenty more sourcing there. That elements of the Reagan campaign told Iran to keep the hostages for a while to influence the election. Now, if a conspiracy that, and it came out, and you know what? Nobody cared. Nobody cared. That's not lead story. It's not. We're more worried about something Trump tweeted or, the debt ceiling or whatever. How does that not become the biggest deal ever? That Jimmy Carter literally had the election stolen from him. And now people are fessing up to it 40-some years later. But just because something was kept secret for decades doesn't mean it can never come out. And I think we just should keep calm and keep an open mind and see what happens with this UFO disclosure thing and this latest whistleblower and see what there is, because there could be something there. And just to repeat what I was saying, if true, this is the biggest news story in human history. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Thanks, as usual, thanks for listening. This has been The Weird Part. I am your host, Visitor Treadwell. Thank you, and good night.